So after the first ban list went into effect, in some ways Yu-Gi-Oh! Did improve at the end of 2004. With Chaos decks being put in check, we saw the rise of two decks that would define one of Yu-Gi-Oh's greatest eras, in the form of Warrior Toolbox and Goat Control, while Chaos itself was still around, having been transformed from the utter turbo and combo fest we saw last time, into the BLS-headed turbo and control decks we're familiar with today. So yeah, things looking up for Yu-Gi-Oh! On this time, it would seem. I'm sure with the first ban list, we got a really healthy, diverse meta, right? Right? No. Now yes, everything I said in the previous paragraph is indeed true, however those three decks weren't the only options available in this new post-Yatta format. Like I alluded to last time, the biggest mistake made with the first Forbidden list was that it was so laser focused on killing one deck in the Yatta Lock combo that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh's non-chaos weighted, terribly designed cards remained untouched, and this ended up being a disaster as it meant there was at least 4 viable FTKs, no longer held back by a plethora of hand attack cards, and this was absolutely awful for Yu-Gi-Oh! In addition to this, although the first ban list did hit many of the poorly designed back row that was clearly the result of early designers not knowing what they were doing, it didn't hit all of them, meaning there was a lot of non-FTK degeneracy as well to deal with on this list. So after a small adjusted list, limited definition of chaos to weaken its combo potential, MST to make battle traps better, Torrential Tribute to reduce further the number of field wipes, and for some reason Protector of the Sanctuary, we got the next full ban list whose one and only goal was to make competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually fun for once, by removing all of Konami's early design mistakes from the game for the most part. And in its wake we got a format so good, there's still a community playing it to this very day. In fact, some people love this format so much they make videos about it on YouTube, can you imagine that? Yes, this is the list that led to Goat Format in all of its glory, the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Format built on back and forth gameplay and not wombo combo degeneracy or hand looping shenanigans for the most part. And it was also the first time competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a wide range of viable decks with different playstyles to choose from, with aggro, control and combo all becoming viable thanks to this list toning down the power of combo to give other modes of play a chance. So let's not waste any more time and pay tribute to the list that first made Yu-Gi-Oh! Great. This is the April 2005 ban list, aka the Goat Format Banlist. So let's kick things off with the cards deemed too strong for the 2000s greatest format. Just to give you an idea on how serious Konami was about ending FTKs in Yu-Gi-Oh! At this time, we're going to look at this list with a card that was banned in the TCG before it even came out, in MacLeod the Destructor, a dark fiend monster. This awfully designed card has one of the dumbest effects in the game. That being when this card hits the graveyard from anywhere, you can activate trap cards from your hand for the rest of the turn. So we'll discuss the combo insanity this card can achieve in a second, but even in a vacuum this card is broken. Now the thing about trap cards is that they are on paper the strongest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! With them having some of the most powerful floodgate effects, the most powerful removal, and some of the counter type, the hardest type to respond to. They also have some of the best draw cards in the game, and some traps can even win the game by themselves in the right setup. What balances this out is the fact that they are incredibly slow, usually requiring to be set for a turn, which makes them vulnerable to removal effects before you've got a chance to activate them. This is why for many years after the Duos Lion's speed boost, trap cards struggle to see relevance fairly often, and why new trap decks either have traps with graveyard effects or one-off Makiura effects like Clue Clock that let you use only one trap the turn is set. So as you can imagine, when you remove that balancing restriction on every trap for a turn, rather than only one like Clock does, all hell breaks loose. Now Solemn Judgment and its ilk are hand traps, Rakaki Break and Wind Blast, and now cards that can break boards the turn you draw them, and Reckless Greed is now a slightly worse Pot of Greed, and that is just if it's destroyed in your turn, as if Makura is destroyed on the opponent's turn, now Mirror Force, Ring of Destruction and Sekiretsu Armor can now all be played as hand traps, meaning you get all the benefits of these battle traps without the downside of leaving them vulnerable to Heavy Storm. So yeah, already Makura is insane without any combos, but where this card truly shines is of course in FTKs. Firstly, this card made Exodia insane. Send this card to the yard and boom, enjoy your 3 extra upstart goblins with Jar of Greed, or 6 in the OCG with Legacy Graze as well, your additional 3 pots of greed with Reckless, and the multiple draws of Good Goblin Housekeeping. Add on the continuous trap Appropriate, and you are all but guaranteed to draw Exodia insanely quickly. Also, expect to hear that a lot today, by the way. But to be honest, Exodia was already powerful even without this card. And MacLeod was more of a win more card than anything else. Now granted, it's one of the best win more cards ever, but Exodia FTK would still been a thing without this card. Not so with the Chick the Yellow OTK. The first of several examples on the list of bad archetypes producing a one-shot combo because of design oversight. Chick the Yellow was part of one of the worst early archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Dark Scorpions. And like his ineffective crime family, he had 2 effects you could choose from upon connecting with an opponent. The one we care about is the effect that lets us bounce a back row to its owner's hand, which again, not once per turn. Why does a worse giant trade matter, you ask? Well, what this meant was, if we set MacLeod and Chick to our graveyard via something like, say, Painful Choice or Graceful Charity, we could activate Call of the Haunted from our hand, bring back Chick, hit for a K, bounce the call, and rinse and repeat until the opponent was dead. Now granted, this combo is far easier to disrupt than the last one, especially nowadays, but on a simplified board, it could get a win very easily. And finally, in the OCG, this card was also used with a card not yet released in the TCG, Exchange of the Spirit, which in contrast to the useless errated version many of you likely know, originally worked like it did in the anime, in that as long as you, and only you, had 15 or more cards in their graveyard, this card made both players swap decks and graveyards, meaning that with MacLeod, the previously mentioned draw cards, and this, it was very possible to draw your deck, fill your grave as you do, and then FTK the opponent by swapping both deck and graveyard, emptying your opponent's deck before they even drew a card. Yeah, there's a reason this card was a menace in the OCG, and I'm glad the TCG took note and was like, no, we don't want to deal with this. Obviously, yes it did. Usually with early game FTK enablers, there were cards that were intended to be innocuous on their own, but became broken when synergies were found that the designers didn't intend. MacLeod, on the other hand, at a base level, is broken, as I've shown, with the amount of non-combotic things he can do, never mind the FTK potential he's capable of. In fact, much like CED, this card to this day is still too strong for the game, as it remained banned for over 20 years for recently coming off with a card destroying errata that not only limited the effect to 1 trap a turn, but required this card to hit the yard from the field for it to work. So yeah, now it's just a worse Kooklock. So I guess the lesson for card designers here is, if you make a card for the anime where its owner plays cards like Rope of Life as its best trap cards, maybe rebalance it for the actual game where players are trying to win, not make a duel last an episode's length of time. I chose to begin the video with MacLeod the Destructor to highlight how serious Konami was about banning FTKs, but make no mistake, he is not the card most old school players think of when we hear the term FTK. No, that honour goes to this little demon, Magical Scientist, a card you may have seen today even though he's been in maximum security banlist prison for over 20 years, because like any rich asshole, this guy has been making a fortune selling his fusion-related supplies even while he's locked up. A level 1 spellcaster scientist, much like MacLeod, was locked up for the crime of cheating the cost of powerful cards to create an FTK. This is because for the cost of 1000 life points, this card lets this controller summon a level 6 or lower fusion from the extra deck, with the only restriction being they can't attack directly and they have to return to the extra deck at the end phase. And if like our last entry you noticed no once per turn restrictions, congrats, you've spotted the problem! Yes, for 6000 life points, this card lets you put well over 8k of damage on the board. However, like I said, they can't attack directly, so how would you FTK with them? Well, I'll let Yuki tell you how.
Catapult Turtle!
Yep, by combining this card with the pre-errated version of Catapult Turtle, you could summon 7 fusions with more than 2000 attack points, sack them to do more than 7000 damage, and then sack Turtle and Scientist for the win. Now at first this seems like a difficult FTK to pull off, as you'd need 2 Hard Surge monsters to pull it off. However, with Last Will being at 3 for some godforsaken reason at this time, along with the legendary Ocean being able to make Catapult a non-tribute, as well as many other cards to make the deck consistent, this became one of the most feared decks in early Yu-Gi-Oh! In addition to all of this, however, Scientist was not just a combo piece in his own deck, but also a backup in Chaos Yatta decks, as if he failed in the Yatta Lock combo, then getting this card out with a Recruiter, Last Will, or no summoning him off a Sangan or Witch Search was a great backup win con, as summoning a bunch of fusions to clear the field for your Chaos cards to attack directly for the win, or using CD after doing that to finish your opponent off, usually was enough to get a win back in 2004. Again, an obvious yes to this one, as any card that can easily facilitate an FTK has no place in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, you could make an argument that if they had errated Catapult Turtle then, like they did in the future with them being a hard once per turn, then the combo dies and it wouldn't have needed to get the ban. However, the problem is, even if this combo dies, Scientist is an example of a card that hampers future design, which is why even Sans combo he needs to go. If you don't know what I mean by this, think about this. As long as Scientist is legal, any fusion made must be made with him in mind and balanced accordingly. In other words, most likely made worse, as to not make every game a race to summon Scientist. Essentially the same reason Birthing Pod was banned in Magic the Gathering. In addition to this, Scientist is one of the few Yu-Gi-Oh cards that has become stronger over time, even with Yu-Gi-Oh's insane power creep. Because while he hasn't got access to his FTK anymore with Turtle's Errata, he would be the absolute best 1-for-1 target in the game, a great card to get with Selene combos, and times some Magician combo, among many other ways to turbo him out, and once he was out, the amount of bodies he could summon would make him one of the best link climbing cards in the game, and a card that facilitated a bunch of different XCs based combos. So yeah, I think it's safe to say this card is never getting off the ban list without a once per turn errata, which please don't do that, Konami, just leave him where he belongs, on the ban list. Thank you. You know, it's amazing how Konami in the early years could deliberately print bad archetypes aimed solely at the kids who watched the anime and still overlook a fatal design flaw that led to an FTK. As last of our FTK enablers, we have Butterfly Dagger Elma. An equip card, this card is part of the terrible Guardian archetype played by Raphael in the anime, whose gimmick is that they can only be summoned if their corresponding equip is in play. So the idea is you would play the equip to summon a monster, and then the equip would grant the monster you equipped it to a similar effect to the Guardian who was supposed to wield it. In Elma's case, its corresponding Guardian could bring an equip back to the hand on summon, so to emulate this, they gave the dagger the effect to bring itself back to the hand when it was sent to the graveyard, an effect that was, stay with me now, not once per turn. So as you can guess, this card's banning had nothing to do with its own archetype. Instead, we've got to look at Gearfried the Iron Knight, which for those who don't know destroys any equip attached to him. Yeah, you can probably see where this is going. With Gearfried's effect, you can infinitely equip him with this card, destroy it and bring it back to your hand, giving you infinite amount of spell card activations, which when combined with the Royal Magical Library essentially meant you could draw your whole deck before, boom, Exodia. You know, after explaining all of this, it genuinely makes me wonder why it took Konami so long to realise the once per turn effects were kind of important. Now I'll be honest with you, I was going to originally say no to this. After all, let's be honest here, the real problem is Royal Magical Library, a card that has way more FTK strategies than just this, so maybe they should have banned Library instead. But after writing my piece on Magical Scientist, I can kind of see why this card was chosen instead, because much like our Scientist still being legal would have hampered future fusion monster design, this would have done the same thing for spell counter cards, as this card and its combo with Gearfried would have made any card that gained counters when spells were played a difficult card to print without severe restrictions. Again, like Scientist, a once per turn errata would make this card an instant unban, but again I hope they never do that, because since the CED errata made that card useless, I truly believe that even trying to make these old powerhouses legal again is an exercise in its futility, and Konami should just leave them alone on the ban list with their legacies intact. Now our final banned monster for this list may not be an FTK enabler like the rest, but I tell you this, they're as hated as one, it's Fiber Jar. Part of the Jar family that also includes Cyber Jar and the two Morphing Jars, this card shares its brother's trait of drawing you a bunch of cards. However, unlike Morphing Jar, which does both players discard their hands and draw 5 cards, or Cyber and Morphing Jar 2 letting you draw cards and summon monsters to build a field with, Fiber Jar here actually removes resources in exchange for its card draw. This is because, in addition to the Jar's effect of drawing 5 cards, this thing first forces both players to shuffle all cards from their hand, field and graveyard back into the deck. So yeah, this card in every way other than life points resets the game from turn 1, erasing any plays both players have made. So while every other monster on this list is here for making games end way too fast, this one's here for dragging it out way too long. Now Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't the first game to have this kind of effect, as Magic the Gathering has a similar card named Shahrazad, that while slightly different in function serves a similar purpose, essentially restarting the game and dragging it out longer than necessary, and that card is one of the only 3 cards in Magic banned in literally every format. This is because while cards like this do reset most aspects of the game, one thing that isn't reset is time in the round, which means all these cards really do is create a lot of games without an ending going into time. In addition to this, at high level play where most decks at the time were all playing mostly the same core staple cards, this card doesn't even accomplish what I assume was the original purpose of giving losing players a second chance at winning, as when both players are mostly running the same cards, it often comes down to who has more skill when determining who wins. And let's be honest here, if you were playing this card because you were worried about the game going badly enough you'd need it, that likely won't be you, will it? Yes, a million times, yes. Honestly, out of all the cards we talked about on this series so far, I think I hate this one the most. Yes, Delinquent Duo was more annoying than this card, but at least when Duo or any other banned card we covered so far was used, it made the game go quicker, whereas this abomination just makes every game go twice as long. Basically what I'm saying is that this card should have been banned, and in my view should remain banned for the number one reason a card should stay banned: it makes the game less fun. Yes, this card nowadays is slow and like all of the jars would see almost no competitive play, but in the best case for a card being unbanned is that no one will play it, and the worst case scenario is that players will use this card to actively stall out games and troll their opponents, then why even bring it back at all? Fiber jars and unrepentant villain people, leave him in prison to rot where he belongs. So moving away from the solitaire cards for a second, the main theme of this ban list was mopping up the remaining broken spell cards from early sets, starting with arguably the strongest control card ever printed in Change of Heart. A normal spell card, Change of Heart lets you take control of an opponent's monster till the end phase, an effect seen on a few cards, but of course, because this was the first one, there's no downside for doing this, unlike Snatch Steal and Brain Control, which involve either paying or giving your opponent life points, or Mind Control, which has a bunch of downsides. Now at first, this effect seems good, but not broken, until you realise just how much a simple brainwashing effect can have in Yu-Gi-Oh! You see, with this one card you now have the following: a piece of targeted removal for a monster for 1 turn, a piece of tribute fodder, another body to attack your opponent with, any activated effects the monster you took has, and any flip effect that monster has if it was face down, so then you're not denying your opponent once you flip it. Couple this with the fact that Monarch was going to be a lot stronger with the first ban list, and the only good card in the first GX set that kind of wanted to sell being Brain Control, a weaker version of Change of Heart even before they needed errata, and you can see why Konami gave it the axe, making this, in my opinion, the first card banned, not purely for power reasons, but also with financial motives in mind, a trend that will sadly become very common as these lists go on. I'll be honest, I actually had to think about this one for a good while before answering, because yes, Change of Heart is obviously a very powerful card capable of doing more things than many other control spells can. However, Snatch Steal is just as powerful as Change in that it can also take almost any monster, and unlike Change of Heart, it offers more flexibility when it comes to what you can do with those monsters, as they're under your control for as long as you're equipped, not just for the turn, unlike Change. Now, of course, the flip side of that is that Change of Heart can take face-down monsters, whereas Snatch Steal cannot because it's an equip. So I think my final verdict on Change of Heart's banning is that, yes, the banning was justified, with the caveat that this is by far the weakest card to be banned on this list, and an acknowledgement that this banning was mostly done to sell Lost Millennium packs, not just for power reasons. You know, after the first ban list, I'm glad that Konami continued the trend of removing the overpowered hand attack cards from the game by banning both the Forceful Sentry and Confiscation. I mean, it's not like they'd be dumb enough to realise the spell ruler hand attack cards were non-game creating mistakes, and then bring back arguably the most devastating one, leaving a permanent stain on one of Yu-Gi-Oh's greatest formats, right? Right? Well anyway, onto the new cards that are banned here. While Duo will provide the most devastating of the spell ruler hand attack cards, as it could shred a third of an opening hand by itself, there's an argument to be made that in some ways it was the weakest of the three, because while Confiscation and Sentry can only take one card, as opposed to Duo's two, they allowed their user to look at the opponent's hand and choose the card that was removed. This not only gave the card's user a wealth of knowledge about the opponent's strategy and capabilities, it also let them disrupt them by taking either a good piece of their plan or counter to your own plan. Basically, consider Duo's version of hand attacks be like a club, imprecise but more powerful, with these cards more like a sword. They do less overall damage usually, but their precision usually creates smaller, yet potentially more damaging wounds. Starting with Confiscation, this spell is the weaker of the two as it both costs 1,000 life points to use, and also sends the card you choose to a less disadvantageous place for the opponent in their graveyard. Now I can see why this card was seen as the stronger of the two back in the day, and was the one they put the cost onto, as upon release, Monster Reborn was really the only way to get a card back from the graveyard, along with Magician of Faith, Master Darkness for back row. The Forceful Sentry, on the other hand, is in my opinion the most powerful piece of hand attack ever printed. Firstly, unlike both Duo and Confiscation, this card has no activation cost. Now sure, in most circumstances, paying 1,000 life points for Duo or Confiscation is no big deal for their upsides, but the fact that Sentry has arguably a more powerful hand attack effect than either of them, and has no cost to do it, is insane. So what does it do? Well, like Confiscation, this card lets you look at your opponent's hand and remove a card from it. However, unlike Confiscation, which at the very least put the card in the graveyard, where it could be recurred, this nasty thing shovels the target back into the owner's deck. So essentially, for no cost, this card just removes a resource from the opponent's toolbox, as no matter how many times Potter Desires haters may have insisted otherwise, cards in the deck are not resources. Absolutely yes, they did. Hand attack isn't fun in general, but the fact that these cards let you see your opponent's hand and potentially remove a counter to your strategy was game-breakingly awful in a format full of quick kills. Keep in mind, most of the combos we've shown here are 2 to 3 card combos at max, so theoretically you could play these cards much in the same way the Cataxian Probe and Thoughtseize were played in Magic the Gathering combo decks, aka use them while you're getting the pieces together to remove anything that could disrupt your combo once set up. Even outside of this, these kind of cards just aren't healthy for the game, and even to this day not only are all the old hand attack cards still banned, but even seemingly terrible modern hand attack cards like a Pointer of the Red Lotus are also hitting the chopping block these days. This is because, unlike Magic the Gathering, where cards like this are fine, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has no mana. I mean, even in the slower times like when these cards were banned, players often didn't have enough time to rebuild their hand before the advantage they lost from being hand attack cost them the game. And this gets even worse if the cards are hit are limited staples. So overall, I think most players will agree that these cards being banned has been a net positive for the game. I truly wish to compliment Konami for realising this and quickly removing all of the worst offenders from the game early on. Wait, what's that? Oh, son of a... Up next, we've got the perfect example of why designing Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards in a vacuum is a bad idea. A continuous spell, Mirage of Nightmare not only has one of the coolest artworks in early Yu-Gi-Oh!, but also one of the most powerful draw effects, in that during the opponent's draw phase, it lets you draw until you have 4 cards in your hand. Now this sounds utterly broken, especially to a modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Player whose deck can likely enter their own hand very quickly, maximising its usefulness. However, Konami did try and balance this card with the downside of making its controller discard the same number of cards at random during their next turn. A nice cost to have, as it makes it more difficult to use this card's cost to your advantage to set up your graveyard, as the cards discarded aren't your choice. Pity that this cost will never be paid by any player who knows what they're doing. Yes, while I commend Konami for at least trying to balance this card out, the problem is it's stupidly easy to remove this card before its drawbacks ever kick in. The most famous way to do this was to combine this card with the spell Emergency Provisions, which lets you pop a spell trap card on your board to gain 1,000 life points, a combo many of you may know if you watch the anime, because prior to this ban list, it was one of Jaden's favourite plays. In addition to this, we also had Imperial Order prior to the last ban list to shut off the negative ability, and at this point we also had Spell Canceller for the same effect. MST and Dustin could also pop Mirage, as could an opposing Heavy Storm or upon release, Harpies, making this card also potential back row protection in the right circumstances. Again, I do applaud the people who designed this card, for at the very least trying to balance a really powerful effect with a downside, something many other broken cards from this era didn't have. That being said, yes, this card absolutely deserved a ban, because no matter how much the developers tried to make this card balanced, there's no way to make drawing 4 cards that are most of the time free not be broken. Even when this card works as intended, there's still a chance it could be a pure value engine in a deck like Chaos, as even randomly that there's a good chance you discard your Chaos fodder and set up your graveyard. This card's never been unbanned since the list, and more than likely never will be, as this card's another example of a broken card that has somehow only gotten stronger over the years. I mean, back before its banning, the cards I have mentioned were the only way to pop this card, whereas nowadays we have not only found more generic ways to destroy our own back row, but also whole decks whose gameplay revolves around popping their own back row to summon monsters and use effects. So yeah, I don't think a card that in many decks now just says draw 4 is ever going to come back. Do you? And finally for this ban section we have the one card that I am shocked it took Konami more than one list to ban. It's Painful Choice. A normal spell, Painful Choice is in my view the worst example of Konami doing absolutely no future proofing when designing the first couple of sets of Yu-Gi-Oh! As we have here a card that was powerful upon release but became broken within a year, and nowadays may very well be the single most powerful spell ever printed. This is because this normal spell lets us select any 5 cards from our deck, show them to our opponent, and then make them pick one to add to our hand, while the rest gets into the graveyard. So whatever they pick, you're basically getting 5 effects here. The fact that this card was released in the 3rd set is obvious, because this effect just screams, we only have 3 cards that get cards back from the graveyard, no effects that trigger off of this, so why worry about it? I mean, it's like the grave will become a second hand essentially, making this card say draw 5. Honestly, even at its worst, this card still lets you get access to one of the 5 best cards in your deck. And the second we got better cards that want a fuller graveyard, this card became one of the best cards in the game. From simple things like dumping cards in the grave for revival effects, to setting up chaos plays, to even still doing FTKs like MacLeod for example, there was so much this card could do even in the primitive years of Yu-Gi-Oh! And as I'll explain in the next section, nowadays, there's almost no card that can do more in the game than this one card. I'm going to respect all my viewers' intelligence here and not dignify this question with an answer. The worst thing this card can do is give you one of the 5 best cards in your deck, which is not only very powerful in a vacuum, but also lets us circumvent the limited list, because when this card first came out, all the best cards were at 1, and this card was guaranteed we're going to see all of them. More worryingly is that once we get past 2003, this card can set up with the Yatta lock easily by giving CED banish material and also giving us a Sangan or Witch to either summon or reborn. And once we get beyond this point, there's no point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where this card isn't broken as hell, especially at any point past the Dragon Rulers. I mean, can you imagine this card in Burning Abyss or Tear Element for example? I'm sure this will come back to bite me one day, but I'll make this statement right now. Yu-Gi-Oh! As a game will die before this card is ever legal again. So in conclusion, at least as far as the bannings go, this is a phenomenal list. From removing the majority of FTKs from the format, to banning cards that give one player far too big a tempo swing if played early, to just plain removing unfun cards from the game, let's just say there's a reason that Goat Format is still played to this day. However, just taking cards completely out of a format doesn't always fix it. Sometimes certain cards don't need to go, they need to be curtailed a little bit. Also, sometimes mistakes are made and cards that are unjustly sent to banlist prison get their release. So join me next time when we look at the limits, semi-limits and unlimited Goat Format.